Businessman kicks daughter out with only 2 fish. Wanted an inheritance? Here you go. Jessica Parker clutched the plastic bag tightly to her chest as tears streamed down her face. Inside the clear bag, 2 small goldfish swam in circles, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. The door of the mansion had just slammed shut with a bang that echoed through the quiet street of Boston's upscale neighborhood. Her father, businessman Richard Parker, had made good on the threat he'd issued the night before. "You want to know about your inheritance? Here," he had shouted, pointing to the small aquarium. "These fish are all you're taking from here. If you think you're entitled to anything, prove it in court." It all started when Jessica found some old documents in her mother's office, papers showing that Margaret Parker had rights to half the family's assets, rights that seemed to have mysteriously vanished after her passing 3 years earlier. Now at 28, Jessica found herself alone on the sidewalk, without a steady job, money, or a place to stay. Her only companions were Goldie and Pearl, the 2 goldfish she'd raised since she was 15. The sound of a door opening made her look up. Mrs. Eleanor, the 72-year-old neighbor from next door, was walking toward her with a worried expression. "Sweetheart, what happened?" the older woman asked, approaching slowly. "My father kicked me out," Jessica replied, trying to steady her voice. "He called me greedy and said I don't deserve anything except these fish." Mrs. Eleanor shook her head disapprovingly and reached out a hand. "Come with me, dear. You're not staying out here." Mrs. Eleanor's home was cozy, filled with plants and old photographs. She brewed chamomile tea while Jessica transferred the fish to a larger, borrowed bowl. "Your father has always been stubborn, but I never thought he'd go this far," Mrs. Eleanor remarked, settling into the armchair across from Jessica. "Your mother would be heartbroken if she knew." "Did you know my mother well?" Jessica asked, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Mrs. Eleanor smiled warmly. "Margaret was my friend for over 30 years. We talked almost every day over the fence. She told me many things over the years." "What kind of things?" Mrs. Eleanor's expression turned serious. "Things that might explain why you're here today, my dear." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now back to the story. Jessica leaned forward, sensing something important was about to be revealed. "Do you know anything about my mother's inheritance? I found papers showing she was entitled to half the family's assets. Your mother was always very concerned about your future," Mrs. Eleanor said, standing and walking to an old dresser. "She knew your father was difficult when it came to money." She opened a drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Margaret gave this to me a few days before she passed. She said if you ever needed it, I should give it to you." With trembling hands, Jessica opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in her mother's delicate handwriting and a few old photographs. "My dearest Jessica," the letter began, "if you're reading this, something has happened, and you need to know the truth about our family." As she read, Jessica discovered her mother had secretly saved money for years, fearing her husband might one day leave them with nothing. According to the letter, the money was hidden in a place only she would know how to find. "Did she hide money?" asked Jessica, looking at Mrs. Eleanor. "Your mother was a wise woman. She knew your father's temper well," the older woman replied. "But there's something else you need to know about these little fish." Jessica looked at Goldie and Pearl, swimming peacefully in the bowl. "What about them?" "Their original aquarium wasn't ordinary. Your mother bought it from an antique shop and always said there was something special about it. She used to joke that inside it was the future for both of you." "But the aquarium is at my father's house," said Jessica, feeling another wave of despair. "Not anymore," Mrs. Eleanor answered sadly. "I saw the movers take it away this morning. Your father sold everything that belonged to your mother." The revelation hit Jessica like a punch to the gut. She hadn't just lost the house. She'd also lost any clue about the secret her mother had left behind. "Where did they take it?" she asked, trying to keep hope alive. "To Mr. Stanley's antique shop on Beacon Street. But my dear, that man doesn't do favors for anyone." Jessica spent the night at Mrs. Eleanor's house, lying on the living room sofa, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had happened. The little fish slept peacefully in the bowl beside her, unaware of the storm brewing in their owner's life. The next morning, after a simple breakfast of toast and butter, Jessica headed to the antique shop downtown. Stanley Thompson's store was known for rare pieces and high prices. The doorbell chimed as she entered. The place was filled with old furniture, decorative items, and various curios. Behind the counter, a man in his 60s with graying hair and small glasses eyed her suspiciously. "Good morning. Can I help you with something?" asked Stanley, taking in Jessica's plain clothes. "I'm looking for an aquarium that was sold to you yesterday. It belonged to my family." "Aquarium?" He looked thoughtful. "Ah, yes. I did receive a rather interesting octagonal aquarium. A rare piece, handcrafted glass. Already found a buyer, in fact." Jessica's heart sank. "It's already sold?" "Hasn't been picked up yet. The customer's coming at the end of the week," Stanley replied, studying her reaction. "Why the interest? It's an expensive piece. Very expensive." "How much did you pay for it?" Jessica asked, trying to hide the desperation in her voice. "That's confidential business information," Stanley said, crossing his arms. "But I can tell you that if you want to buy it back, it'll cost $3,000. Jessica's legs nearly gave way. $3,000 was more money than she'd ever seen in her life. $3,000? That's impossible. It's a fair price for a piece like that. Hand-cut glass, mahogany base, 1940s craftsmanship. Worth every penny. You don't understand. That aquarium belonged to my late mother. It has sentimental value to me." Stanley shrugged. "I'm sorry, miss. Business is business. If you can't pay, I can't help you." Jessica left the shop with tears in her eyes. $3,000 was an impossible sum for someone without a place to live. Back at Mrs. Eleanor's, she told her about the conversation with the antique dealer. The older woman shook her head sadly. "Stanley's always been hard to deal with. When I was younger, I tried buying an old dresser from him and nearly went broke," Mrs. Eleanor remarked. "But maybe there's another way." "What way?" "You need work, and I know a few families in the neighborhood looking for cleaners. It doesn't pay much, but it's a start." The idea of working as a cleaner didn't bother Jessica. She'd done odd jobs before, but never formally. Her father had always said family women didn't need to work. "Do you think you could recommend me?" "Of course, dear. I'll speak with Mrs. Jacqueline tomorrow. She has a big house and always complains about not finding trustworthy people." That night, Jessica turned on the old cell phone she had and tried to call some friends from her school days. Most had changed their numbers or simply didn't return her calls. She realized that, living isolated in her father's mansion, she had lost touch with almost everyone. The only person who answered was Ashley, a former classmate who worked as a supermarket cashier. "Jessica, oh my, it's been so long. How are you?" Ashley said enthusiastically on the other end of the line. "I'm going through a tough time, Ash. My dad kicked me out of the house." "Kicked you out, but why?" Jessica briefly explained what had happened, avoiding details about the inheritance. "What a mess," Ashley commented. "Listen, I live with 2 friends in a small apartment downtown. If you want, you can stay with us for a few days while you figure things out. It's tight, but it's better than the streets." The offer brought Jessica immense relief. At least she'd have a place to stay while saving money to recover the aquarium. The next day, Mrs. Eleanor kept her promise and found Jessica a job at the home of Jacqueline Morrison, a widowed businesswoman who lived in a 2-story house in the same neighborhood. Mrs. Jacqueline was a woman in her early 50s, with blonde hair and a direct way of speaking. She looked Jessica up and down before making the offer. "Mrs. Eleanor said you're trustworthy. I need someone to clean the house twice a week and take care of the garden. I'll pay $200 a week plus bus passes." It was less than Jessica had hoped for, but it was a start. She accepted immediately. "Can you start tomorrow?" "Yes, Mom." "Good. And one thing. I don't touch my employer's personal belongings. I clean, organize, and leave. Less complication for everyone." Jessica agreed and left Mrs. Jacqueline's house feeling a little more hopeful. If she could save $200 a week, she'd have enough to recover the aquarium in less than 4 months. That afternoon, she moved into Ashley's apartment. It was a small space with 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and 1 bathroom. Ashley lived with Emily, who worked at a clothing store, and Rachel, who was a manicurist. "You can stay on the living room couch for now," Ashley said, helping Jessica organize her few belongings. And the little fish can stay in the kitchen. The three friends were very welcoming, but Jessica noticed her presence changed the dynamic of the house. They were young, single women who liked having guests over and throwing small parties. With one more person, the space felt even tighter. On her first day of work at Mrs. Jacqueline's house, Jessica arrived promptly at 8 in the morning. Her employer showed her around, explaining how she wanted each room cleaned. The house has 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a living room, kitchen, laundry area, and the backyard garden, Mrs. Jacqueline explained. I insist everything be spotless. I host important guests here. While working, Jessica learned that Mrs. Jacqueline owned 3 women's clothing stores downtown. The house was always tidy, but her employer was particular about details. My dear, this glass is streaked, Mrs. Jacqueline said, pointing to the living room window. You have to use a dry cloth after the wet one, or it ends up like this. Jessica redid the work without complaint. She needed this job more than anything. At the end of the first day, as she was putting away the cleaning supplies, she overheard Mrs. Jacqueline talking on the phone in the living room. No, attorney. I don't want a drawn-out lawsuit. I want this inheritance issue with Robert settled quickly. The longer it takes, the more complicated it gets. Jessica unintentionally listened in. Her employer was discussing legal matters. What do you mean the will can be contested? But he signed everything properly. Oh, I see. The signature can be questioned if there's an expert analysis. All right, doctor. I'll think about what you said. When Mrs. Jacqueline hung up the phone, Jessica pretended to be busy organizing the cleaning rags. But the words she had heard kept echoing in her mind. Contest the will and signature can be questioned. Could there be something irregular in her mother's will too? On her way back to the apartment, Jessica stopped at an internet cafe and researched contesting wills. She discovered it was possible to challenge a will's validity if there were signs it was made under pressure, if the person wasn't in the right state of mind, or if the signature was forged. Her mother had made the will just a few months before passing, when she was already very ill. Jessica remembered how Margaret often complained she couldn't even hold a pen properly because of the tremors caused by her medication. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. That night in the apartment, Jessica talked to her friends about her situation. Have you looked for a lawyer yet? Asked Emily, painting her nails on the couch. I don't have money for a lawyer, Jessica replied, feeding the little fish. There's the public defender's office, suggested Rachel. My cousin used it when she divorced her ex-husband. It's free. But it takes forever, said Ashley. My aunt waited 2 years just to get an appointment. Jessica felt disheartened. 2 years was too long. In 2 years, the aquarium would have been sold long ago, and any clues about her mother's secret would be gone forever. By her second week of work, Jessica had settled into a routine. She woke up early, went to Mrs. Jacqueline's house, worked all day, and returned exhausted in the evening. The pay was meager, but at least she was starting to save a little. Then something unexpected happened while she was cleaning Mrs. Jacqueline's office. As she vacuumed, she bumped into a stack of papers on the desk, and some documents fell to the floor. Picking them up, she couldn't help but notice the letterhead on one. Wilson and Partners, attorneys at law. It was the same firm that had handled her father's legal affairs for years. What fell? Mrs. Jacqueline asked, appearing at the office door. Sorry, ma'am, I accidentally knocked over the papers, Jessica said, handing them back. Mrs. Jacqueline took the documents and glanced at them. Don't worry. Just some paperwork my lawyer brought yesterday. Boring family matters, you know how it is. Do you use Wilson and Partners? Jessica asked, trying to sound casual. I know them. Why? They handled some legal matters for my family too. Mrs. Jacqueline looked at her with renewed interest. What kind of matters? Jessica hesitated but decided to share part of the truth. Inheritance issues. My mother passed 3 years ago, and there were some loose ends. Ah, I see, Mrs. Jacqueline said, her expression softening. Family matters are always complicated. You lost your mother so young, poor thing. Yes, ma'am. And how's it going? Did you manage to sort everything out? Actually, no. I'm having some trouble with my father over my mother's assets." Mrs. Jacqueline sat in the office chair and motioned for Jessica to sit too. "Listen, Jessica, I don't usually meddle in my employees' lives, but you seem like a good girl. If you want to talk about it, maybe I can offer some advice. I've been through similar situations." The unexpected kindness from her employer touched Jessica's heart. She briefly recounted being kicked out of the house and the documents she had found showing her mother's rights to the family assets. "Your father really kicked you out?" asked Mrs. Jacqueline, incredulous. "He did. Said I could only take the little fish I'd raised since childhood." "What an absurd situation," exclaimed her employer. "And are you sure your mother had rights to the assets?" "The documents I found seem to suggest so. But I don't understand much about legal matters." Mrs. Jacqueline grew thoughtful for a moment. "Jessica, let me give you some advice. Do you know attorney Jennifer Adams? She has an office nearby and specializes in family law. She's an excellent professional. But I can't afford lawyer fees. You have nothing to lose by talking to her. Sometimes attorneys offer a free initial consultation just to review the case. If she thinks you have a chance, she might even agree to work for a percentage of what you recover." The suggestion brought new hope to Jessica. Maybe there was a way out that didn't involve waiting years for the public defender's office. "Do you have her contact information?" "Yes, I do. Let me write it down for you." Mrs. Jacqueline wrote the attorney's name and number on a piece of paper and handed it to Jessica. "You can mention I referred you. Jennifer is a good person. She'll treat you well." The next day during her lunch break, Jessica called attorney Jennifer Adams' office. The secretary scheduled an appointment for the end of the week. The office was in a modern commercial building downtown. Jessica arrived wearing her best clothes and carrying a folder with all the documents she'd found. Attorney Jennifer was a woman in her early 40s with brown hair tied in a bun and an intelligent, attentive gaze. She greeted Jessica warmly and asked her to recount the whole story from the beginning. Jessica told her everything, discovering the documents, the argument with her father, being kicked out, the letter left by her mother, and the aquarium situation at the antique shop. "Let me see these documents you found," said the attorney, reaching out. Jennifer examined the papers carefully, taking notes on a pad. "Jessica, these documents are very interesting. Your mother did indeed have rights to a significant portion of the family estate. I see here that she contributed financially to the purchase of several properties. But what about the will? My father said she left everything to him." "That's exactly the issue. I'll be frank with you. There are some irregularities that stand out in this case." "What kind of irregularities?" "First, the will was made very shortly before your mother's death, when she was already weakened by illness. Second, based on the dates here, I see it was altered at least 3 times in just 2 months." Jessica felt her heart race. "Is that unusual?" "Very unusual. People who make wills usually think carefully before deciding. Constant changes could indicate external pressure or that she wasn't in the right state to make those decisions." The attorney continued examining the documents. "There's something else that catches my attention. Your mother's signature on the final will looks quite different from her earlier ones. It could be due to her health, but it might also suggest other things." "What do you mean, other things?" "Well, in extreme cases, it could be forgery, but that's a very serious accusation and would require handwriting analysis to confirm." Jessica could hardly believe what she was hearing. Was it possible her father had pressured her mother to change the will? Or worse, could he have forged her signature? "Attorney, do you think I have a chance to overturn this?" Jennifer stayed silent for a moment, organizing the papers. "Look, Jessica, I'll be honest. It's a complex case, but you have enough grounds to challenge the will. The problem is that your father will certainly hire expensive lawyers to defend himself, and this could be a long and costly battle. And how much would you charge to represent me?" "Normally, I'd charge between $15,000 and $20,000 for a case like this, but your situation is special. If you agree, I can work for 20% of what we recover. I only get paid if we win the case." It was an offer that seemed too good to be true. Jessica had nothing to lose. "I accept." "Great. I'll need you to sign some documents and bring me any other papers you find related to the family's assets. I'll also need to speak with people who knew your mother and can testify about her health when she made the will." Her neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor, knew my mother very well. They talked every day. Perfect. I'll want to speak with her too. When she left the attorney's office, Jessica felt more hopeful than she had in weeks. Finally, she had someone on her side in this fight. Back at the apartment, she told her friends everything. "That's great, Jess," said Ashley, hugging her. Finally, things are starting to fall into place. "It's not settled yet," Jessica cautioned. The attorney said it could be a long battle. And in the meantime, the aquarium is still at the antique shop. "How much time do you have before it's sold?" asked Emily. "I'm not sure. Stanley said the buyer was supposed to pick it up at the end of last week, but when I stopped by yesterday, it was still there." "Maybe the buyer backed out," suggested Rachel. "Or maybe they're just late picking it up." That night, Jessica struggled to sleep. The attorney's revelations swirled in her head. Was it possible her father had really pressured her sick mother into changing the will? What if it was worse than that? She remembered her mother's final months. Margaret grew weaker and more confused because of the medication. There were days she didn't even recognize her own daughter. How could someone in that state make clear decisions about inheritance? The following week, attorney Jennifer began working. She scheduled a meeting with Mrs. Eleanor and went to the older woman's home to talk. Jessica was present during the conversation. Mrs. Eleanor spoke about her friendship with Margaret and the concerns her friend had about her husband. "Margaret always said Richard was very controlling with money," Mrs. Eleanor recounted. "She couldn't even buy a dress without asking his permission." "And how was she in her last months?" Jennifer asked. "Very bad, attorney. Sometimes she'd come talk to me by the fence and wouldn't even remember what we'd discussed the day before. Once she even asked me who the girl standing next to her was, and it was Jessica herself." The attorney took careful notes. "Mrs. Eleanor, do you remember any time when Margaret mentioned making or changing a will?" "I do. She got very upset one day, said Richard was pressuring her to sign some papers. She didn't want to sign because she didn't fully understand what was written." "When was this?" "About 2 months before she passed. I remember because it was right after Jessica's birthday." Jennifer and Jessica exchanged meaningful looks. That was exactly when the will had last been changed. "Did Margaret ever say what those papers were?" The attorney continued. "She said they were important documents about the house and the family business. Richard claimed it was to protect the family, but she was suspicious." "And did she sign?" Mrs. Eleanor sighed deeply. "Unfortunately, she did. She came to talk to me afterward, crying, saying she was afraid she had done the wrong thing. She said Richard got very angry when she tried to read the papers before signing." The information Mrs. Eleanor was sharing was becoming more and more concerning. It seemed Margaret had indeed been pressured to sign documents she didn't fully understand. "Mrs. Eleanor, would you be willing to give a formal statement about these conversations?" asked Jennifer. "If it helps Jessica, I'll do anything. Margaret was like a sister to me." After the meeting, Jennifer explained to Jessica what the next steps would be. "I'll file a motion to invalidate the will based on lack of informed consent. In other words, we'll argue that your mother wasn't in a position to fully understand what she was signing and that she was pressured by your father." "And what are our chances of winning?" "With Mrs. Eleanor's testimony and the documents you brought, I'd say we have a good shot. But your father will fight back, no doubt." "How long will it take?" "Cases like this usually take between 6 months and 2 years. It depends on how many appeals your father's defense files." 2 years. That was a long time. Jessica thought of the antique shop's aquarium and felt a pang of desperation. "Attorney, while the case is ongoing, is there any way to stop my father from selling the family assets? I can request an injunction to block the sale of properties and other significant assets. That would prevent him from liquidating the estate during the proceedings." "What about the aquarium at the antique shop?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "The aquarium is trickier because it's already been sold. But if we can prove it was sold fraudulently after the inheritance dispute began, we might be able to reverse the sale." Jessica decided to tell Jennifer about her mother's letter and the possible secret hidden in the aquarium. "My mother left a letter saying she had hidden something important in a place only I would know to look. I think it might be related to the original aquarium." "What kind of thing could she have hidden?" "I don't know. Money, documents, something she wanted to make sure reached me." Jennifer grew interested. "If there really is something hidden in the aquarium, It could be important evidence for our case. I'll try to include recovering the aquarium in the injunction. A few weeks passed. Jennifer had filed the case and obtained a partial injunction blocking the sale of the family properties, but the aquarium wasn't included because it was considered a low-value item. During that time, Jessica kept working at Mrs. Jacqueline's house. Her employer had been very understanding of the situation and had even helped by recommending people who could give Jessica extra work on weekends. One day, while cleaning Mrs. Jacqueline's living room, the phone rang. Her employer was in the garden and asked Jessica to answer. "Hello, Mrs. Jacqueline's residence." "Who am I speaking with?" asked a male voice on the other end. "This is Jessica, the housekeeper." "Ah, you must be the young lady Jacqueline mentioned to me. I'm attorney William, her lawyer." "Yes, sir. Mrs. Jacqueline is in the garden. Would you like me to get her?" "Actually, I wanted to speak with you. Jacqueline told me about your situation and I'm interested in your case." "What do you mean, sir?" "I'm very familiar with Wilson and Partners. They've handled your father's business for years, haven't they?" "Yes, that's true. Jessica, I don't mean to intrude, but I think you should know a few things about that firm." Jessica's heart began to race. "What kind of things?" "I'd rather talk in person. Can you come by my office tomorrow during lunch?" No charge, just an informal chat. Jessica agreed to the meeting and wrote down the address. When Mrs. Jacqueline returned from the garden, she told her about the call. "William is an excellent attorney," said Mrs. Jacqueline. "If he wants to talk to you, it must be something important." The next day, Jessica went to attorney William Bradley's office. It was a more modest setting than attorney Jennifer Adams, but the lawyer welcomed her very cordially. Attorney Bradley was a man around 50, tall and thin, with a calm way of speaking. "Jessica, I'll get straight to the point. I've known the firm Wilson and Partners for many years, and I can say they haven't always been very ethical in their practices." "What do you mean, attorney?" "I've had a few cases where I had to face them in court. I've always noticed a tendency to favor clients with more money, sometimes at the expense of justice." Jessica felt a chill. "Are you suggesting they did something wrong in my family's case?" "I can't say anything without seeing the documents, but I can tell you I've seen them pressure elderly or sick people into signing documents without properly explaining the contents. And that's legal. It's a gray area. Technically, if the person signs, it's valid, but morally it's questionable, and legally it can be challenged if we can prove there was a lack of informed consent." Attorney Bradley stood and walked to the window. "Jessica, I'll make you an offer. I can speak with your current attorney and offer my help on the case. I know Wilson and Partners' tactics well and how to counter them. But I can't afford two attorneys. I'm not talking about charging you. I'm talking about cooperation. If your attorney agrees, I can provide support in exchange for a percentage even smaller than what she's charging." It was a tempting offer. Having two attorneys working on the case would certainly increase the chances of success. "I'll talk to attorney Jennifer." "Great, and there's one more thing you should know." "What?" "Stanley, from the antique shop, is known for dealing with items that sometimes have questionable origins. I'm not saying he does anything illegal, but he doesn't usually ask many questions about how sellers acquired the pieces they bring him." "Are you saying my father might have sold the aquarium improperly?" "It's possible. If we can prove the aquarium was sold during an ongoing inheritance dispute, we might be able to cancel the sale." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. When she left attorney Bradley's office, Jessica felt more confident. Now she had two qualified people working in her favor. That same afternoon, she called attorney Jennifer and told her about the conversation with attorney Bradley. Jennifer knew the colleague by reputation and agreed to the partnership. "William is a good attorney," Jennifer said, "and he really knows Wilson and Partners practices well. Having him with us could be very useful." "What about the aquarium?" "William is right. If we can prove it was sold improperly, we can challenge the sale. I'll prepare a new petition, including that request." A few weeks later, Jessica received an unexpected call. It was Stanley from the antique shop. "Miss, remember me? I'm from the antique shop where you came looking for that aquarium." "I do remember, Mr. Stanley." "Well, something strange happened here. The buyer of the aquarium disappeared. It's been 2 weeks since he was supposed to pick it up, and he hasn't shown up or answered his phone. Jessica's heart skipped a beat. What does that mean? Well, if he doesn't show up by the end of the week, I'll consider the sale cancelled. Then the aquarium will be available again. And can I buy it? You can, but the price is still the same, $3,000. Jessica quickly did the math. She had saved about $1,200 working for Mrs. Jacqueline and doing some extra jobs on weekends. She still needed $1,800. Mr. Stanley, couldn't you do a payment plan? Payment plan? He laughed. Young lady, I sell antiques. I don't do payment plans. But the aquarium belonged to my mother, and it has a lot of sentimental value to me. Look, the best I can do is hold it for another week. If you get the money by then, we have a deal. Otherwise, I'll put it back up for sale. 1 week. Jessica needed to find $1,800 in a week. That night in the apartment, she talked to her friends about the situation. Jess, that's a lot of money to come up with in a week, said Ashley, worried. Can't you borrow from someone? Suggested Emily. From who? I don't have close relatives besides my dad, and he's the problem. What about Mrs. Eleanor? She's retired, living on a small pension. I can't ask her for money. What about your boss? Mrs. Jacqueline seems to like you. Jessica hesitated. Borrowing money from her boss was tricky. It could either work out or ruin their working relationship. I'm not sure it's a good idea. What do you have to lose by trying? Insisted Rachel. The worst she can say is no. The next day, Jessica arrived early at Mrs. Jacqueline's house and waited for the right moment to talk. After lunch, when her boss was resting on the porch, she gathered her courage. Mrs. Jacqueline, can I talk to you about something personal? Of course, Jessica. Sit here. Jessica explained the situation with the aquarium and the deadline Stanley had given her. I need $1,800 by the end of the week. I know it's a lot, but I was wondering if you could lend it to me. I can pay it back in installments, deducted from my salary. Mrs. Jacqueline stayed silent for a moment, thinking, Jessica, $1,800 is a lot of money, and you already owe me for the salary advances I've given you. Jessica's heart sank. I understand, ma'am. I'm sorry for asking. Wait, let me finish, said Mrs. Jacqueline, smiling. I said it's a lot of money, but I didn't say I wouldn't lend it to you. Jessica looked at her boss with renewed hope. What do you mean? Jessica, you're an exemplary employee. You work hard, you're honest and dedicated, and most importantly, I know you'll pay me back because you're a woman of your word. You'd really lend it to me. I'll do better than that. I'll give you the money as a salary advance. You'll pay me back over 10 months with $180 deducted from your paycheck each month. It was a generous offer. In 10 months, Jessica would have paid it all back, interest-free. Mrs. Jacqueline, I don't know how to thank you. No need to thank me, just keep being the employee you are. By the end of the day, Jessica left Mrs. Jacqueline's house with an envelope containing $1,800 in cash. She could hardly believe she was finally going to get her mother's aquarium back. The next day, she arrived at the antique shop as soon as it opened. So, you got the money? Asked Stanley, surprised. I did, said Jessica, showing him the envelope. Stanley counted the money carefully and wrote out a receipt. The aquarium is yours, but you'll need a van to transport it. It's heavy and fragile. Jessica hadn't thought of that. How would she get the aquarium to the apartment? Do you know anyone who does deliveries? I do. My brother-in-law has a van and does some deliveries. He charges $50 for drop-offs in the city center. Another $50. Jessica sighed and agreed. She'd come this far. She wasn't stopping over $50. Stanley's brother-in-law, a friendly man named Mike, arrived shortly with the van. He and Stanley carefully wrapped the aquarium in bubble wrap and blankets. This aquarium really is beautiful, commented Mike as they carried the piece. Handcrafted glass, a base made of fine wood, it's truly an antique. During the ride to the apartment, Jessica kept looking at the wrapped aquarium on the back seat of the van, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. She had finally recovered the aquarium, but she still didn't know if there was actually something hidden inside. At the apartment, Mike helped carry the aquarium into the living room. Jessica's friends were impressed by its beauty. Wow, Jess, exclaimed Ashley. It's really stunning. Now I understand why you went through so much trouble to get it back. After Mike left, Jessica was alone with the aquarium. It was bigger than she remembered, with an octagonal shape and delicate glass details. The wooden base had small drawers she had never noticed as a child. With her heart pounding, she began examining every part of the aquarium, searching for the secret her mother had hidden. First, she checked the drawers in the base. They were empty, except for some old fish food remnants. Then she carefully inspected the glass, looking for anything that might be glued or attached. Nothing. She was starting to feel discouraged when she remembered something. When she was little, her mother always insisted she be careful while cleaning the bottom of the aquarium because it had a delicate piece that could break. Jessica carefully turned the aquarium upside down. On the underside of the wooden base, there was a small metal plate that seemed like just a manufacturer's label. But upon closer inspection, she noticed it was slightly loose. Gently, she managed to remove it completely. Behind the plate was a small cavity in the wood, and inside it, a sealed plastic envelope. "I found it!" Jessica shouted, making her friends rush into the living room. "What is it?" asked Emily. "I found what my mother hid." With trembling hands, Jessica opened the plastic envelope. Inside was a flash drive, some old photographs, and a handwritten letter. The letter was addressed to her. "My dearest Jessica, if you're reading this, it means you found what I hid. Inside this flash drive are documents and recordings that reveal the truth about your father and our money. Use this information wisely. I love you forever, Mom." "My God, Jess," said Rachel. "Your mother really left hidden evidence." Jessica plugged the flash drive into Ashley's laptop. Inside were dozens of files, scanned documents, financial spreadsheets, and several audio recordings. She clicked on one of the audio files. It was her mother's voice. Date, March 15th. "Today, Richard forced me to sign more papers without letting me read them properly. He said it was to protect the family, but I'm sure he's lying. I've discovered he has a secret account at another bank and has been embezzling money from the company for years." Jessica and her friends exchanged shocked glances. "I also found out he's had a mistress for over 10 years, a woman named Sharon, who works at the company. She knew everything about the embezzlement and helped him hide the money." The revelation hit Jessica like a punch. Her father hadn't just been dishonest in business, he had also betrayed her mother for years. "I'm recording this because I know my time is running out. The doctors won't say it, but I know I won't get better. I want Jessica to know the truth and have a way to protect herself if Richard tries to deceive her." There were over 2 hours of recordings. There were over 2 hours of E. Margaret had meticulously documented all of her husband's schemes, including names, dates, and amounts. The photographs showed images of financial documents, bank statements, and even some pictures of Richard with this Sharon woman. "Jessica, this is explosive," said Ashley, still processing everything they'd heard. "Your mother basically handed you a full dossier against your father." "I need to take this to Attorney Jennifer immediately," said Jessica, unplugging the flash drive. The next day, Jessica scheduled an urgent meeting with Jennifer and William. When the attorneys heard the recordings and saw the documents, they were stunned. "Jessica, this is much more than we expected," said Jennifer. "Your mother obtained evidence of fraud, tax evasion, adultery, and coercion. It's an open and shut case." "What does this mean in practice?" asked Jessica. "It means we won't just invalidate the will. We'll also recover far more than what originally belonged to your mother," explained William. "With this evidence, we can even sue your father for embezzlement and other financial crimes." "But I don't want him to go to jail, I just want justice." "Don't worry," reassured Jennifer. "We can use this information to negotiate. Your father will certainly prefer settling over facing criminal charges." The attorneys explained that with this evidence, they could demand not only the annulment of the will, but also the reversal of all irregular financial transfers Richard had made over the years. "We're talking about a lot of money, Jessica," said William. "According to the spreadsheets your mother prepared, your father diverted at least $2 million over a decade. It was an amount Jessica couldn't even fathom. Her whole life had been marked by financial constraints, and now she was discovering her family was far wealthier than she'd ever imagined." "How long will it take to resolve everything?" "With this evidence, I believe we'll have a favorable ruling within 3 months," said Jennifer. Your father won't be able to defend himself against such clear proof. The following week, Jennifer and William filed a new lawsuit, far more comprehensive than the first. This time, they weren't just contesting the will, they were demanding a full investigation into all of Richard's business dealings. The reaction came swiftly. 2 days after the new lawsuit was filed, Jessica received a call on her cell phone. It was her father. "Jessica, is that you?" Richard's voice sounded different, weaker, uncertain. "It's me, Dad. We need to talk. Can you come to the house?" "I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Please, sweetheart. It's important." Jessica hesitated. It had been months since she'd spoken to her father, since the day he'd kicked her out. "Dad, if this is about trying to convince me to drop the lawsuit, you're wasting your time." "That's not it. I saw the documents your attorney submitted. I know your mother left evidence." His voice faltered on the last word. "And what do you want to say about it?" "I want to apologize, Jessica, and I want you to come home." It was the last thing Jessica expected to hear. All these months, she had imagined confronting her father with proof of his crimes, but she'd never imagined he'd admit to everything so quickly. "Dad, too much has happened. I don't know if it's that simple." "I know it's not simple. I know I've done terrible things, but you're my daughter, and I'm so sorry, Jessica." For the first time in months, Jessica heard genuine emotion in her father's voice. He was crying. "I'll think about coming over to talk," she finally said. "Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you." After hanging up, Jessica was confused. Part of her wanted to go to her father's house and settle everything at once. Another part feared it might be some kind of trap or manipulation. She decided to consult the attorneys before making any decisions. "I wouldn't recommend it," said William. "Your father might be trying to buy time or learn about our strategy." "But what if he genuinely wants to make amends?" asked Jessica. "He might be sincere," admitted Jennifer, "but it could also just be a tactic. What I can suggest is that if you decide to go, don't go alone and don't sign any documents without consulting us first. Can you come with me?" "That wouldn't be appropriate," said Jennifer, "but you can bring a witness, Mrs. Eleanor, for example." The suggestion made sense. Mrs. Eleanor knew both Jessica and Richard Parker well, and her presence could deter any attempts at manipulation. That afternoon, Jessica went to Mrs. Eleanor's house and told her about her father's call. "Do you think I should go, Mrs. Eleanor?" The older woman thought for a moment. "Listen, dear, your father has always been a proud man. If he called asking to talk, he must really be shaken, but you're right to be cautious. Would you come with me?" "Of course I will. Margaret would be happy to know I'm helping you." The next day, Jessica and Mrs. Eleanor went to the mansion where the young woman had grown up. It felt strange to be back there after everything that had happened. Richard opened the door himself. Jessica was shocked by her father's appearance. He had lost a lot of weight, his hair had turned completely grey, and there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "Jessica," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm so glad you came." "Hi, Dad." "Mrs. Eleanor, thank you for accompanying my daughter." They sat in the living room, the same place where Jessica had confronted her father about the inheritance documents months earlier. "Jessica, I don't even know where to begin," said Richard, running his hands over his face. "I've done terrible things, not just to you, but to your mother too. Why did you do it, Dad? Why lie about Mom's inheritance?" Richard sighed deeply. "Because I'm a cowardly and greedy man. I was always afraid of losing control over the money, the family, everything. When your mother started questioning my decisions, I felt threatened." "So you really forced her to change the will?" "I did. She was weak, confused from the medication, and I took advantage of that. It's the thing I'm most ashamed of in my life." The confession brought tears to Jessica's eyes. On one hand, she felt relief at finally hearing the truth. On the other, she felt immense sadness for how much her mother had suffered. "What about Sharon?" she asked, surprising her father. Richard closed his eyes as if in physical pain. "Did your mother know?" "She knew everything, Dad. She left recordings talking about the embezzlement, the betrayal, all of it." "My God," Richard murmured. "She never said anything to me." "Because she loved you, Dad. Even knowing everything, She loved you. Richard began to cry openly. I lost the best person in my life because of my greed, and I almost lost you too. Mrs. Eleanor, who had stayed silent until then, spoke up. Richard, Margaret told me many times that you weren't a bad person, just lost. She always hoped you'd change. And now it's too late, he said, wiping his eyes. Maybe not, Jessica said, surprising even herself. If you really want to make things right, we can try. How? After everything I've done? First, you need to return everything you took from our family. Second, you need to end any relationships that harmed our family. And third, you need to treat me like a daughter, not an enemy. Richard looked at his daughter with a mix of shock and gratitude. You'd forgive me. I don't know if I could ever fully forgive, but I'm willing to try rebuilding our relationship if you prove you've truly changed. I'd do anything to have my daughter back. Then let's make a deal. You talk to my attorneys and voluntarily return everything that belongs to our family. In exchange, I'll ask them not to pursue criminal charges against you. You'd do that for me? I'd do it for Mom's memory. She wouldn't want to see our family destroyed over money. In the following days, Richard kept his word. He met with Jennifer and William, handed over all the financial documents, revealed the location of the secret accounts, and agreed to return all the money he had embezzled over the years. He also ended any relationship with Sharon and fired her from the company. Your father is being very cooperative, Jennifer told Jessica. We've already tracked down most of the embezzled money. We're talking about nearly $3 million that will be returned to you. It was a sum that would completely change Jessica's life. She would never have to worry about money again, and could help the people who had supported her during the toughest times. And my mother's will? It's been nullified. The inheritance will be divided according to the law, 50% for you and 50% for your father. But considering the money he embezzled, which will be returned, in practice you'll end up with about 80% of the estate. A few weeks later, all the legal proceedings were finalized. Jessica had officially become a wealthy woman, owning multiple homes, a thriving business, and a significant amount of cash. The first thing she did was pay off her debt to Mrs. Jacqueline and give a generous gift to the woman who had believed in her when she needed it most. Jessica, this is too much money, Mrs. Jacqueline said, looking at the envelope her former employee had handed her. I can't accept it. Yes, you can. You helped me when I had nothing. Now I can repay you. She also gave gifts to Ashley, Emily, and Rachel, who had shared their apartment with her during the hardest months, and she made sure to pay for private health insurance for Mrs. Eleanor. My dear, you don't have to do this, the older woman said. Yes, I do. You took care of me like I was your own daughter. Now it's my turn to take care of you. With her financial situation resolved, Jessica needed to decide what to do with her life. She could simply live off her wealth, but she felt she needed a greater purpose. It was during a conversation with her father that the idea came to her. Dad, the family business has always been run by you. I never really understood how it worked. It's a construction company, Richard explained. We build affordable housing and commercial buildings. There are over 100 employees. What if we turned it into a cooperative? A cooperative? Yes. The employees would share in the profits and have a say in major decisions. It would be a way to make up for some of the harm that was done. Richard thought for a moment. It's an interesting idea, but are you sure? It means giving up a lot of profit. Dad, we already have enough money for several lifetimes. What matters now is doing the right thing. The proposal was presented to the company's employees, who welcomed the idea enthusiastically. Within a few months, Parker Construction had become the region's first construction cooperative. The most experienced employees took on leadership roles, and Jessica became the chair of the board, ensuring the company upheld the ethical values her mother would have approved of. Richard, for his part, accepted a consulting role, working part-time and dedicating the rest of his time to charity work as a way to make amends for his past mistakes. You know what amazes me the most? He said to Jessica during a Sunday lunch. You could have sued me. You could have sent me to prison. You could have destroyed me. But you chose forgiveness. I learned that from Mom. She always said holding on to bitterness only hurts the one who holds it. 6 months after the upheaval, Jessica was in her new office at the company when she received an unexpected visitor. He was a young veterinarian named Brian, who'd been hired by the cooperative to care for the animals at the construction site. The company had adopted a policy of rescuing abandoned dogs and cats and caring for them until they found responsible homes. "Jessica, I came to talk about the little goldfish you have in the reception aquarium," said Brian. "Goldie and Pearl? What about them? Did you know they're an extremely rare species? They're not just common goldfish, they're celestial orandas, a lineage that barely exists anymore in the United States." "Really?" "Very serious. A pair like this could be worth over $50,000 to specialized collectors." Jessica laughed at the irony. Her mother had truly thought of everything. Even the little fish that seemed like mere pets were an investment for her daughter's future. "But they're not for sale," she said. "They've been my companions since the very beginning." "I completely understand," Brian replied, smiling. "Actually, I came to offer my services to take care of them. Free of charge. It's a privilege to work with such a rare species." During Brian's regular visits to care for the fish, he and Jessica developed a friendship that gradually grew into something deeper. Brian was a kind man, devoted to animals and genuinely interested in doing good. He didn't know about Jessica's fortune when they met, and that mattered to her. "You know I'm rich, right?" she said during one of their meetings. "I do. Everyone in town talked about your story, but it doesn't change anything for me." "Why?" "Because I fell in love with the woman I met while she was taking care of 2 little fish in a cooperative office. The woman who worked as a cleaner to save money, who slept on friends' couches, who forgave her father even after everything he did. That woman is worth far more than any fortune." A year after the whole saga began, Jessica and Brian married in a simple ceremony at the house she had bought next to her father's mansion. The celebration was held in the garden, attended by everyone who had helped during the hard times. Mrs. Eleanor, now 73 and in perfect health thanks to the insurance Jessica paid for, was the matron of honor. Mrs. Jacqueline, Ashley, Emily, and Rachel were the bridesmaids. Richard himself walked his daughter down the aisle, tears in his eyes. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered in her ear before giving her away to Brian. "I know, Dad. I know." During the reception, Jessica made a special toast. "I want to thank everyone here today. A year ago, I was alone on the street with just 2 fish in a plastic bag. You showed me that true wealth isn't in money, but in the people who love and support us." The crowd applauded, moved. "I also want to thank my mother, who, even though she's no longer with us, managed to take care of me until the end. And I want to thank my father, who had the courage to admit his mistakes and start over." Richard, seated in the front row, discreetly wiped his eyes. "And finally, I want to thank Goldie and Pearl," Jessica said, pointing to the decorative aquarium placed in the garden for the occasion. "If it weren't for you two, I would never have discovered the truth that changed our lives." The 2 fish swam peacefully, oblivious to the emotion around them, yet symbolically at the center of a story of struggle, forgiveness, and new beginnings. In the months that followed, Jessica's life grew even fuller. The cooperative thrived, creating jobs and income for the whole community. She and Brian bought a small farm on the outskirts of town, where they ran a sanctuary for abandoned animals. Richard, meanwhile, had found a new purpose in life. He began volunteering at charity organizations and even started giving talks on business ethics, using his own story as an example of what not to do. "You know what I learned from all this?" he said to Jessica during one of their now traditional Sunday lunches. "That no matter how much money you have, it means nothing if you have no one to share it with." "Mom always said that," Jessica replied. "She said money was just a means, never an end. Your mother was a wise woman, much wiser than I was. She loved you, Dad. Even knowing everything, she loved you. And I wasted that love because of greed. But now I understand that the greatest wealth a man can have is his family's love." 2 years after their wedding, Jessica and Brian received news that would complete their happiness. They were expecting a baby. "What should we name them?" Brian asked, gently touching his wife's still small belly. "If it's a girl, I want to name her Margaret, after my mother." And if it's a boy? Michael, Jessica said, smiling, like the angels who protect families. When their daughter was born, Jessica brought her home, and the first thing she did was introduce little Margaret to Goldie and Pearl. "Look who's here," she said, holding the baby near the aquarium. "This is Grandma Margaret's granddaughter. You'll take care of her just like you took care of me." The fish swam closer to the glass, as if understanding the moment's significance. Mrs. Eleanor, now 75, had become the child's adoptive grandmother. She spent every afternoon at Jessica's house, telling stories about Margaret and teaching her granddaughter old recipes. "Your mother would be overjoyed seeing this little one," Mrs. Eleanor said, rocking the baby. "She always said she wanted to be a grandmother." "She is a grandmother," Jessica replied. "In some way, she's here with us." Richard had also become a devoted grandfather. He visited his granddaughter every day and promised to be everything for her that he hadn't been for Jessica as a child. "I'll tell her all our family stories," he said, cradling the baby carefully. "But I'll tell the truth without hiding my mistakes. She'll learn from your experiences, Dad, and she'll grow up knowing it's possible to change and start over." The cooperative business continued to thrive. They had expanded and now also built subsidized affordable housing for low-income families, a way to give back to the community some of the luck they'd had. Brian had opened a low-cost veterinary clinic, treating pets from struggling families for symbolic fees. The couple used part of their fortune to fund these social projects. "You know what I'm proudest of in our story," Brian said to Jessica as they watched their daughter sleeping in her crib beside Goldie and Pearl's aquarium. "What?" "That we turned pain into love, betrayal into forgiveness, and greed into generosity. Your mother planted a seed of justice that grew into a tree of compassion." Jessica smiled, watching the fish swim peacefully, the same ones that had been with her from the hardest moment of her life to the complete happiness she now knew. "Mom always said, happy endings exist for those brave enough to fight for them," she said. And I think she was right. Outside the window, the garden bloomed in vibrant colors. The family was together. Love had conquered resentment, and future generations would grow up knowing that no matter how dark the storm seems, there's always hope for a new dawn. Goldie and Pearl kept swimming, silent guardians of a story that began with tears and ended with smiles, reminding everyone that life's greatest treasures aren't made of gold, but of love, forgiveness, and second chances. End of the story. Now tell us what you thought about this story of overcoming and forgiveness. Do you believe Jessica made the right decision by forgiving her father? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories.